So this is my closet under the stairs. And I decided to build my own fiber optic ceiling. Let me show you how I did it. So I'm making a space closet for my kids, and I feel like a space closet needs a star ceiling, right? So the inspiration for this actually came from my favorite ride at Disneyland. Have you ever been on the Peter Pan ride? And when you're floating around and the ship goes into the sky, you see all those little twinkling magical stars? That is what I'm going for. Now I ordered this fiber optic kit. It came, fiber optic strands. Okay, so we're gonna test these out. And you can order them with different numbers of strands. I ordered one with 400 strands because I wanted a lot of stars. But what it comes with is that motor or that light source. And then it has the fiber optic, they're just kind of like little plastic cords, and that connects into that part. It also comes with a remote control. This remote control can change the colors of the little fiber optic lights. It also has the ability to kind of have a little twinkly star effect. Yes, please. Now my kids, this is a side note, my kids fight over which setting they feel like is the best for the stars. My daughter likes pink, my son likes blue on dim. I like the white twinkly stars. But hey, there's a remote, so everybody can do what they love. So this is the first time that I did this project, and I wanted to make sure before doing it on the entire ceiling that I knew what I was doing. So to test it, I grabbed a board and some fabric in case I wanted it to kind of have like a soft, kind of fluffy feel. I quickly found out that the fabric was gonna make it more complicated because not only did I have to drill through the board, but that binded up the fabric, and I also had to poke holes through the fabric. So I got rid of the fabric, but the good news is drilling through that board and pushing through those fiber optics, it looked perfect. I could already tell on just that small sample size that this was gonna work great. Okay, so now we get started. I measured the space. I knew where I wanted those stars to go. I cut my board, and before I actually went and made everything out of this, I made sure that board fit. I always test the fit. So I painted my board black because I want this to be like a black night sky. The color black that I use is actually my favorite color black. I use it everywhere. It's called Black Magic by Sherwin-Williams. It's the perfect soft black with no blue undertones. Trust me, you'll love it. Okay, drilling the stars and the constellations. This is the part where I started maybe regretting all of my life choices. I counted, and I think that I drilled 400 holes. But I quickly realized I wasn't really gonna do constellations. I started drilling holes everywhere and kind of making them look like there were some clusters. But what I knew I wanted to do is I always love hiding little secret messages in my projects, and this is for my kids. So I actually hid a heart, but then I also hid the first letter of each of my children's names so that when they were in there looking under the stars, they could find their name in the stars. How cool is that? So I forgot to mention, but this board that I'm using, it's called a yucca board. The thickness of it, it's less than 1/4 of an inch. You can get different thicknesses of it at the hardware store, but it's a little bit floppy, and so I needed something to support it, which is why I glued on those support boards. And I glued it on because I knew eventually I was going to have screws going through all of those to the ceiling, so I really just needed it to be in place right now for the sturdiness of it and the stability. I also made sure that I left a little bit of a gap for the light strands to be able to come out and actually attach to that motor source. So then I tested the fit again. Can you tell this makes me nervous? Just to make sure that it was the right size, that it's gonna fit, that the gaps were in the right space for the strands to go out to the motor. Everything looked perfect. Now we're ready to go with feeding 1,000,000 strands in through 1,000,000 holes. Does this try your patience just thinking about it? It should. But you're gonna do the project anyways because it's so cool. Put on a good podcast, put on some good music, get comfortable, get a friend, because you're gonna be here for a while. So here's how this works. You have 400 strands, 200 strands, whatever you decide to get. And just like hair, it can kind of get tangled as you're pulling and separating them because I think mine are like 9 feet long. It's a lot of strands and it's a lot of length in strands. So what I did is I sectioned mine off just like a hairstylist person would, right? And I zip tied them together so that I was working in little groups and I didn't end up with a tangly, hot mess. So I take each strand, I feed it through, and I really pull it through. Don't worry about the length at this point. Just really pull the whole thing through and make sure that if anything tugs on it, it's not gonna slip out, because we're gonna trim those later. And it looks a little bit like a hot mess on the top, but as long as you're keeping that area clean where you know all the fiber optic strands are gonna kind of exit off of your board into that motor and light source and then plug into the wall, you're okay. Like you're not gonna see the mess. Here's something that I didn't do though that I do recommend that you do. If you do a little dab of glue right where the strand is going through the board, that way it's gonna make it so that they don't pull out as easily and pop through. I legit forgot to do this. I'm just gonna have to trust my kids to not push them all back up through. How did I mount it? So I should have had a helper, carried it in on my head. And what I did is I knew where my supports were in the ceiling. I had really long screws. And remember, I put those supports on the back side of this thin yucca board. And I just screwed through every single corner, in through the board, in through my support board, and then into whatever my ceiling support board was. And I did it in all of the corners and then everywhere else in the ceiling where there was extra support. Now remember, my support boards, I left that gap so that my strands would have somewhere to exit and attach that light source. Yeah! That's the reaction when what I planned and what I actually did actually worked, and I'm obsessed with how this looks. So now that this is in place and it's working, now I can actually really shore the whole thing up and screw in everywhere into the corners and the edges, making sure it's secured to the ceiling. Give it a little wiggle, make sure it's not falling anywhere. To trim this, it's actually super easy. I just took normal kid scissors and you go around and you're cutting the strands. That's it. Now there's a few different looks that you can get. You can cut it pretty flush with that edge, and so they're all kind of one-dimensional. I left little slight variations of like a cutting length. That way it kind of gave it a little bit more of a 3D feel. If you've put your hot glue on the back, then you don't have to worry about those pieces pulling through. If you didn't put hot glue on the back, you can kind of push them and adjust the length here if you want to. And I felt like outer space would not be complete without being immersed in space and in that blackness. So I decided to paint the other walls black just to kind of continue that whole cohesiveness and really make it feel like you're in the depths of the universe. And here is the complete fiber optic ceiling, probably one of my favorite projects to date, one that I have always wanted to do, and I kid you not, every single time I open that closet and I see that ceiling, it makes me smile. And my favorite thing about this project is I wanted a space where my kids could go and where they could relax and where they could feel kind of like they were out of this world. And it's so cool to see my kids go in there, and when I open the door now, they're like, Mom, we're having some relaxing time. Mom, close the door. Leave us alone. It really actually helps transport them to a different space. And honestly, I like going in there too. And that's it. That's how I made my fiber optic star ceiling in my space closet. A totally normal project to do, right? Make sure you hit like and subscribe. And if you want to see other projects like this or other tutorials, I'm going to link some of them down below in the description. Make sure to check them out.